Shalom Israel, Most High in Christ bless. All praises to the Most High. We made it another week, another day, another Bible History 101. We will pick right up where we left off last week in the days of Solomon. All right, we were just talking about the beginning of his reign. Now we're going to get into the meat of the matter. All right, and this is might go long, but it's a good lesson. All right, 1 Kings 5. I'm gonna start with verse 1. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants unto Solomon, for he had heard that they had anointed him king in the room of his father. For Hiram was ever a lover of David. All right, as you can see in the title of this lesson, the Israelite Phoenician connection. Tyre and Zidon were the capital cities of ancient Phoenicia, the ancient Phoenicians. And if you know anything about the Phoenicians, they're the first people to, for example, give Greeks the alphabet. They're the first people to circumnavigate Africa. They controlled that whole Mediterranean region as far as seafaring is concerned, because that's how everything was shipped back in the day. All right, so the ancient Phoenicians ruled that whole territory. And Solomon sent to Hiram, saying, Thou knowest how that David my father could not build a house unto the name of the Lord his God, for the wars which were about him on every side, until the Lord put them under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God hath given me rest on every side, so that there is neither adversary nor evil occurrent. All right, so you see here how, I do want to check something real quick to make sure that we are not having any technical difficulties. Let's see if everything is sounding all right. All right, everything's sounding good to me. All praise to the Most High. So we see here how Hiram, the ruler of the Phoenicians, wanted to make peace with the Israelites. All right. He saw that they were on the rise. He heard the tales of David, how David took over everything, everybody in the region. And he said, okay, I want to make peace. I want to make an allegiance, a treaty with these Israelites. All right. And you see where Solomon's head at this time. He could have said, well, yeah, let's go take over the world. But he said, first, the thing that I need to do is to build a house unto my God, to build a temple unto my God. All right, verse 5. And behold, I purpose to build a house unto the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord spake unto David my father, saying, Thy son, whom I will set upon thy throne in thy room, he shall build a house unto my name. Now therefore command thou that they hew me cedar trees out of Lebanon, and my servant shall be with thy servants, and unto thee will I give hire for thy servants according to all that thou shalt appoint. For thou knowest that there is not among us any that can skill to hew timber like unto the Sidonians. All right, so Solomon, he said, okay, I hear your request, and we can work together if you get me these cedar trees from Lebanon. All right, and talking him up a little bit, even saying, oh, there's nothing like the Phoenicians when it comes to carpentry. Verse 7. And it came to pass, when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, that he rejoiced greatly, and said, Blessed be the Lord this day, which hath given unto David a wise son over this great people. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the things which thou sentest to me for, and I will do all thy desire concerning timber of cedar, and concerning timber of fir. My servant shall bring them down from Lebanon unto the sea, and I will convey them by sea in floats unto the place that thou shalt appoint me, and will cause them to be discharged there, and thou shalt receive them, and thou shalt accomplish my desire in giving food for my household. All right, so Hiram said, I'll do it. I'm going to send them down there in a boat, and you'll pick them up at the docks. All right. Verse 10. So Hiram gave Solomon cedar trees and fir trees according to all his desire. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 measures of wheat for food to his household, and 20 measures of pure oil. Right, so you see this business exchange, the cedar in return for the crops and the oil. Thus gave Solomon to Hiram year by year. And the Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he promised him. And there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and they two made a league together. All right, they made a brotherly covenant, as another scripture says. All right. Verse 13, and King Solomon raised a levy out of all Israel, and the levy was 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month by courses. All right, so this is a huge project, taking years. All right, a month they were in Lebanon, and 2 months at home. and Adoniram was over the levy. And Solomon had 70,000 that bare burdens. All right, so that's 70,000. And 80,000 hewers in the mountains. All right, so that's 70,000 just people carrying things. All right, and then you have the 80,000 who are actually working in the mountains and hewing out stone. All right, beside the chief of Solomon's officers, which were over the work, 3,300, which ruled over the people that wrought in the work. So this is thousands and thousands of people. All right, doing all this to make sure that it gets done. Right, so you have thousands of people working in Lebanon. You also got people working back home, bringing the stuff in, building it. All right, huge project to build a temple. Verse 17. And the king commanded, and they brought great stones, costly stones, and huge stones to lay the foundation of the house. And Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders did hew them, and the stone squarers. So they prepared timber and stones to build the house. Right. So this is the first project that they worked on, was the temple. I'm not going to get into all the different measurements of the temple, because that's what the next few chapters are about. We're just going to go ahead and skip all that. Luxurious, wonderful, something to read on your own time. And here we see Solomon building his own house after he finished the temple. He built his own house. And here's a little bit more about Hiram's background. Verse 13. This is 1 Kings 7 and verse 13. And King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram out of Tyre. He was a widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass. So that's how Hiram grew up. All right, now I do like to show the maps on here. And here we see on this map, this is the one that I generally use. You see where Tyre and Zidon are, in the land of Tyre, just north of the tribes of Israel. All right, and it said his mom come from Naphtali, which is a neighboring tribe. They were neighbors with Tyre and Zidon. All right. And his father, a man of Tyre, a worker in brass. And he was filled with wisdom and understanding and cunning to work all works in brass. And he came to King Solomon and worked all his work. All right. So not only is Hiram a king of the Phoenicians, but he also was very skilled with his hands. All right. Then it goes into all the things that he built in the temple. All right. So from there, and again, these are specific details of what's in the temple. We're not necessarily going to get into that, something to look into on your own time. And here we see they actually bring the ark to the temple to house it. This is 1 Kings 8 and 1. I'm not going to get into the prayer that Solomon prays. There's a lot of prophecy, a lot of good things in that prayer, but again, this is Bible history. 1 Kings 8, starting with verse 1, Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel, and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. Right, so bring it up. And all the, verse 2, And all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto King Solomon at the feast in the month Ethanim, which is the 7th month. That would be the Feast of Tabernacles, the month that we are currently in. All right. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark. And they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tabernacle of the congregation, and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle, even those that the priests and the Levites bring up. All right. And of course, they did a big sacrifice, all that wonderful stuff. And I'll read through this until the big crescendo here. Verse 5, And King Solomon, all the congregation of Israel that were assembled unto him, were with him before the ark, sacrificing sheep and oxen that could not be told nor numbered for multitude. Right? So this is a wonderful day, a glorious day, making a huge sacrifice. All right? Verse 6, And the priest brought in the ark of the covenant of the Lord into his place, into the oracle of the house, to the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims. Right? So they made huge statues of angels. That's where they placed it. For the cherubim spread forth their 2 wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubims covered the ark and the staves thereof above. And they drew out the staves, that the end of the staves were seen out in the holy place before the oracle, and they were not seen without, meaning outside. And there they are unto this day. There was nothing in the ark save the 2 tables of stone which Moses put there at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the children of Israel, when they came out of the land of Egypt. And it came to pass when the priests were come out of the holy place that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. All right, so I just wanted to point that out, how God's glory actually dwelt within the temple. All right, that's the first temple. So from there, 1 Kings 9 I want to read, because all this is pretty important to the Israelite Phoenician connection that we're going to talk about. 1 Kings 9, verse 1. And it came to pass, when Solomon had finished the building of the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all Solomon's desire which he was pleased to do, that the Lord appeared to Solomon the second time, as he had appeared unto him at Gibeon. And the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built, to put my name there forever. And mine eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me, as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and will keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as I promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. But, verse 6, but if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them, and this house, which I have hallowed for my name, will I cast out of my sight, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. So, this is what God always does. He always gives us this ultimatum, right? This choose life or choose death scenario. And that's what he's doing for Solomon here. He's saying, look, if you choose life, if you choose righteousness, if you choose my commandments, I will establish your name forever, and there will always be peace in your kingdom. All right? But if you don't, even this house that I have hallowed, even this house that I have filled with my glory, I will destroy this house, and I will cast out the children of Israel, and they will be a proverb and a byword among all people. All right? And at this house, which is high, everyone that passeth by it shall be astonished and shall hiss. And they shall say, why hath the Lord done this unto this land and to this house? He said, man, it's going to be so bad that people are going to be asking, why did he jack them up this bad? And they shall answer, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought forth their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have taken hold upon other gods, and have worshipped them and served them. Therefore hath the Lord brought upon them all this evil. So remember this ultimatum. All right? And we'll see what Solomon does. Spoiler alert, he doesn't stay righteous. Verse 10. And it came to pass at the end of 20 years, when Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house. Now Hiram, the king of Tyre, had furnished Solomon with cedar trees and fir trees, and with gold, according to all his desire, right? Hiram just kept giving Solomon gifts, because Hiram was, a fan of David, right? He was a big mark for David. So he really loves Solomon too, bringing him all these gifts. That then King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. All right, Galilee, of course, that's where Jesus grew up. But Galilee is around, let's see if it shows it on the map. Yeah, Sea of Galilee, right here. So Galilee is that whole region around that sea, around Naphtali. All right. And Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they pleased him not. And he said, what are these cities which thou hast given me, my brother? And he called them the land of Kabul unto this day. And Hiram sent to the king 64 talents of gold. So he still sent him gold. He still sent him presents. All right. But let's see if we see Kabul on here. Oh yeah, Kabul, right there. So he gave him a bunch of cities in this region. Kabul actually is there on the border of Asher and Zebulun. But let's go back. So he seen him, and it was like, he's like, these cities are rough. These are like ghettos. These aren't like big cities. These aren't good cities. He was kind of displeased at that. All right. Verse 15. And this is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord, and his own house, and Millo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. Right. So Solomon put heavy taxes on the people so that he could accomplish all these works. But as we're going to look at here in a minute, it was nothing in the days of Solomon. All right. For Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and taken Gezer and burned it with fire, and slain the Canaanites that dwelt in the city, and given it for a present unto his daughter, Solomon's wife. All right, and we read about that last week. Solomon marrying that Egyptian woman. Solomon built Gezer and Beth Horon, the nether, and Baalath and Tadmor in the wilderness and the land. Let's see if we see Gezer in them. Gerar, Gaza, Sharon. I know that it was a bit of an issue. Had to be. Let's see how we doing now. How are we doing? We back up? Are we back up? It looks like we back up. Okay. All praises to the Most High. Yeah. Apologize for the technical difficulties, but, you know, power outage and all that kind of stuff. Anyway. Gezer, Beth Horon. We've seen Baalah and maybe not Tadmor, but it's probably going to be in the same region. Built up this general region, as it said, in the wilderness. So let's go back. Verse 19. And all the cities of store that Solomon had, and cities for his chariots, and cities for his horsemen, and that which Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, and in Lebanon, and in all the land of his dominion. And we actually see that on the map of the land of his dominion. And it's actually a little bit more than this, but this is what it shows on this map. As you can see, up here at the Euphrates, and it actually went all the way down into Egypt, because as we were just reading about how he made an allegiance with Pharaoh's daughter. He married Pharaoh's daughter and therefore made an allegiance with the kingdom of Egypt. So Solomon ruled that whole land, all that east coast of the Mediterranean. And again, with that brotherly covenant that he made with Hiram, the Phoenicians, that gives him access to all the Mediterranean Sea. And that's what we're about to see as we read further. All the land of his dominion, verse 20. And all the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites which were not of the children of Israel, their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel also were not utterly able to destroy, Upon those did Solomon levy a tribute of bond service unto this day, right? So put them in captivity, made them slaves. Verse 22. But of the children of Israel did Solomon make no bondmen, but they were men of war, and his servants, and his princes, and his captains, and rulers of his chariots, and his horsemen, right? So he didn't do that to the Israelites, only to the Canaanites. Verse 23. These were the chief of the officers that were over Solomon's work, 550, which bear rule over the people that wrought the work. So obviously they had structured that work. We just read earlier about how the project to build the temple and the projects to build all these cities, to build all these buildings, this was thousands and thousands and thousands of people, right? Booming the economy of ancient Israel. Verse 23. These were chief. Okay, yeah, I just read that. Verse 24. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David unto her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Millo. And 3 times in a year Solomon offered burnt offerings and peace offerings upon the altar which he built unto the Lord. And he burnt incense upon the altar which was before the Lord, so he finished the house. Verse 26. And King Solomon made a navy of ships in Ezion-Geber, which is beside Elath, on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. Right, so we see the land of his dominion. I didn't get rid of that, did I? No. Okay. And we see Ezion-Geber, or Ezion-Geber. So out of this port, because obviously up here out of like Tyre, I know it doesn't show that being his dominion, but it was part of the league that he made with Hiram. Out of Tyre, out of any of the coasts in Manasseh here, you can get into the Mediterranean Sea. But the Ezion-Geber port, let's see if I can pull up a Middle East map real quick. Yes, right here. And I might even have to pull out a world map on this one. Oh no. Where you at? Here we go. Alright. So as you can see, Ezion-Geber, which is up here in modern day Jordan, actually goes down into the Red Sea. And the Red Sea goes down out here by Ethiopia and Yemen. And it comes out and it goes into the Indian Ocean. Alright. Keep that in mind, because that's about to come right back. Get rid of that. Don't save. Okay. In Ezion-Geber. Verse 27. And Hiram sent in the navy of his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. And they came to Ophir, and fetched from thence gold, 420 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. So where is Ophir? Where is Ophir? A lot of people don't know, because it's an ancient name. We got all these modern names that changed throughout the years. But let's go back to Genesis. Genesis chapter 10, starting with verse 21. We might jump around. This is the table of nations. This tells you where everyone comes from and where they're supposed to be, as in originally, their lands. Verse 21. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. All right. If you don't know this, we've been through this before, but Elam is the Persians, Ashur is the Assyrians, Lud is the Lydians, which became the Turks, and Aram are the Syrians. All right. And Arphaxad. Arphaxad is where the chosen lineage comes from. So we're going to skip verse 23. That's just about Aram. Verse 24. And Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. Eber is where you get the term Hebrew from. All right. Now to Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. So in Peleg's days, that's when the Tower of Babel happened. All right. And his brother's name was Joktan. Peleg is the chosen seed. All right. But we're going to read about Joktan for a little bit. And Joktan begat Almadad, and Shalef, and Hazarmaveth, and Joram, and Hadaram, and Uzal, and Diklah, and Obal, Abimiel, and Sheba, and Ophir, and Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. And their dwelling was from Meshah, as thou goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. All right. So when you start looking, let me pull this up again. I already clicked out of it. When you start looking at the east, all right, because it's talking about east of Israel. That's what it's talking about, because that's, you know, where the Bible was written. That's where all the you hear about the north. They're, you know, either talking about Babylon or north, or more north than that. They're talking about the south. They're talking about Egypt, or even more south than that. So when they're talking about the east, I just pointed out how Elam is the Persian, so it's got to be east of the Persians. All right, so you start getting into the mountains of the east, you start getting into like the Kush Mountains in Afghanistan and the Himalayas. All right, and you see what's between Afghanistan and Himalayas, the Indus River. All right, the Bible calls this the Paisan River. All right, that's the Havilah, is the Paisan, the Indus, Pakistan. So when you go south of Pakistan, you get what? India. All right. India is Ophir. All right. India is Ophir. So let's go back. The 1 Kings 9. So we can get the full picture. All right. 1 Kings 9, reading again. Verse 28, and they came to Ophir, and fetched from thence gold, 420 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. All right, so that was known as the best gold of the day, came from Ophir in the modern province of Karnataka. I believe it's Karnataka, might be Karnataka, but still, an Indian province. All right, from there, let's go to the Chronicles, because the Chronicles talk about the same history as in the Kings. Kings and the Chronicles talk about the same history. All right. So from there, let's go 2 Chronicles. It might be 8. No. 9? Well, let's talk about the Queen of Sheba. We can, I want to skip to the part about Ophir. All right. Yes. So I'm going to start with verse 17. We might come back to this to talk about Queen of Sheba. But this is verse 17 in 2 Chronicles chapter 9. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. There were 6 steps to the throne with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on each side of the sitting place, and 2 lions standing by the stays. And 12 lions stood there on the one side and on the other, upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. Talking about marvelous, magnificent, everything overlaid with gold. He's got these golden lions. All right. And all the drinking vessels of the king Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was not anything accounted of in the days of Solomon. So understand, in Solomon's days, everybody in the land was rich. All right, at least a majority, overwhelming majority. And Solomon had everything. All right, he had all the gold. He ruled the world at this point. All right, verse 21. For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. All right, so now we're talking about the other side. Now we're talking about the Mediterranean. And it's none of these maps are really showing it. So I'm going to exit out of that one. And I'm going to pull up a world map. Now this is a, not that one, the Peters projection map, all right? So usually when you use world maps, you use the Mercator projection, and that'll have the the equator. That'll have the equator like way down here. For some reason, that'll have the equator like down here. And it's because they enlarge all the northern countries, you know, to make themselves look more important or whatever. But Peter's projection map is more accurate. But anyway, let's zoom in. And this one isn't very high res, so I apologize for that. But you can see the land of Israel is right here. This is the territory where Solomon ruled, from here in Egypt up to the Euphrates, right? So all this is what Solomon has dominion over. Now, Tarshish is Spain. Some people may say it's like Corsica or Sardinia or even Sicily, which would be, you know, this region. But I've always heard Spain, so I go off Spain. All right. So when it says ships of Tarshish, that means that they have a fleet of ships here on the other side of the Mediterranean. All right. So let's read that again, where it says, I may be missing out on some things. I may be skipping over some things accidentally, but it says, for the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Every 3 years, once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold, silver, ivory, and apes and peacocks. All right. So it says ships of Tarshish, but it also says they brought gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. All right. So you can't. Maybe you could find gold and silver in Europe. I'm not even sure about that. Maybe they have some mines up there, but most of the gold that you're going to find over in that region is going to be down here in West Africa. All right, and especially when it said ivory and apes, that all come from here. All right, so when it talks about those ships of Tarshish, they weren't just going here and back. It said every 3 years, right? So that means they're going here, 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 all the way down in here. All right, that's what those ships of Tarshish are doing. They're going, and there's even rumors of going up in here, right? That's what those ships of Tarshish are doing. And we talk about the port of Ezion-Geber being right here. And that port will take you out. And Ophir is like right here in India. All right. So that's where they're getting that from. So from there, you telling me they're not going to stop in here and there and here and there and here? Of course. All right. So now it would just be speculation to say they went past here, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. There's no evidence per se. Like, there's no scripture that says they went past there, but I wouldn't doubt it. All right. So for now, we're just gonna say that, and then of course the trip back. But anyway, that's Ophir. That's Ophir. And I don't even know if this says Ophir in this section. All right. Yeah, so, oh yeah, here it goes. This verse 10, and the servants of Hiram and the servants of Solomon, which brought gold from Ophir, brought algum trees and precious stones. That's another hint that this is actually India, that Ophir is India. Is algum trees are also known as red sandalwood, or speculated to be red sandalwood, and you can only get those in India. So let's go back to the Kings. See, that's what we've been working with. We'll jump back into the Chronicles anytime that it's needed, but the Chronicles that we have is the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah, so it doesn't speak about the Kings of Israel when it splits, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that a little later. But First Kings, we read 9, so let's do 10. But before we do, oh, it even says it right here about the navy of ships. And the navy also of Hiram that brought gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir great plenty of almug trees and precious stones, right? So they weren't just bringing gold from India, they were bringing all sorts of different things, all right? So from there, and you got the same thing about Tarshish. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, right? So they only had to go back to Israel once every 3 years, all right? And, you know, once they're there, they might stay for a little bit, but they're living on the seas, all right? But anyway, I got here. Yeah, let's stop right here in the Queen of Sheba, and we'll come back to it. But I got here in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, all right? Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. The definition of Phoenician, all right? Because the Phoenicians are just what the Greeks called the Canaanites. That's all that is. You know, Phoenicians had, or rather, the Greeks had their own names for everybody. The Bible had certain names, right? And generally people were sticking to their biblical names, the names of their forefathers, until, you know, the Greeks come along and they changed everybody's names. But I got right here the definition of Phoenicians, all right? So this is Phoenicia. It says country along the Mediterranean coast, you know, approximately around 120 miles long, extending from Arvad or Arados to Dor, just south of Carmel. The Semitic name for the land was Canaan, all right? So Canaan and Phoenicia are interchangeable. The term Phoenicia is from a Greek word meaning dark red, perhaps because the Phoenicians were the discoverers of the crimson purple dye derived from the murex shellfish. And actually Phoenicia is a word that means like purple. It means that dye that they discovered. All right. The people were Semites. Now, take note of that. It said the people were Semites. The Phoenicians were Semites. Even though we just read here about Hiram was Tyre and Zidon, and you read in Genesis 10, Tyre and Zidon is Hamitic. They're Africans, right? But it says they're Semitic, all right? The people were Semites who came into migration from the Mesopotamian region during the 2nd millennium BC. They became great seafarers, establishing colonies at Carthage and Spain, and perhaps even reached England. And that's what we just read about the ships of Tarshish. All right. They were famous shipbuilders, and it gives scriptural reference for that in Ezekiel 27, and carpenters, and it just referenced what we just read in 1 Kings 5. Its most famous cities were Tyre and Zidon. Its religion was polytheistic and immoral, and was brought to Israel by Jezebel. And actually, we read, when you read the Judges, there was always Baal worship throughout the land. There was always Ashtaroth worship. There was always Molech worship, all right? God warned us before even going into the land. He said, don't worship these gods. Obviously, that didn't stick. And it even says right here, Hiram, one of their kings, was friendly with David and Solomon, all right? And then it gives scriptural reference that we just read. And another Hiram helped Solomon in the building of the temple in Jerusalem. All right. So it's even saying right there that that's different. That it's two different Hirams that's helping Solomon. All right. Can't attest to that because the Bible just refers to one. Or so I think. Anyway. But the point is, that the Zondervan Bible Dictionary called the Phoenicians Semitic. When you read what the Bible says, it calls them Hamitic. So how do we resolve this, right? So I got the book here, From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph R. Windsor. This is a free PDF online if you just want an online version to look over. But I do suggest you buy it. It's a good book. It's a wonderful book. I'm in which chapter is this? This is chapter 3, Afro-Asian Culture Goes to Europe. All right, this is actually page 26, and actually, rather, I'm gonna start with page 27 in this book. All right, so I'm gonna start with this sentence right here. It says, "The Canaanites were the primordial aborigines of the land of Canaan." All right, we may call them Africans because of their blood relationship to the other inhabitants of the African continent. So the original Canaanites who inhabited the land of Canaan, they were not Semitic. All right, they were Hamitic. There were 11 Canaanite tribes living in the land of Canaan and surrounding it before the black Israelites possessed it. All right, so Rudolph R. Windsor, he's actually, as a framing device, going to start with African nations. That's how he does with the book. He starts with African nations and shows how they linked with Israelites. But of course, in Bible History 101, we go from the Israelite perspective first. So before we even get here to page 27, I do want to jump further. I want to jump further in the book because there's a specific line that I saw the other day that I want to reference. All right, and which chapter is this? No, that's not what I want. Let's see. The more simple. I think it's actually before this. Yes. Okay, here we go. So this is what I want to. This is what I want to go back to. All right. So I'm going to read this sentence out of context, and we're going to go back and start again so that we have this context. All right. So this is page 107 in the book. Which chapter is this? This is actually the chapter, The Canaanites and Phoenicians in Africa. All right. So just this one little stanza out of context. "We should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migrations since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians." All right, and that happened about 1000 BC. All right, so keep that in mind. All right, we should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migrations since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. All right, so keep that in mind. That the Israelites have been on the move and going in everywhere at least since 1000 BC. All right, 900s BC, around that time. Where is this at? Where is this? Not the Egyptians. Here we go. No, page 20. Page 27. It actually says at page 27. Nice. All right. So, picking up with this second paragraph on page 27, it says, "The greatest cultural and commercial cities of these black Canaanites were Tyre and Zidon," and we mentioned that earlier. Sometimes written Zidon instead of Zidon, same, they're interchangeable. This city gets its name from Sidon, the firstborn son of Canaan. That's what the scripture says in Genesis 10. The Sidonians and the Tyrians were of the same race, right? Because they had the same forefathers. And their kings ruled over both of these cities, Tyre and Zidon. That's why I said they're both capitals of the Phoenician Empire, territory, whatever you want to call it. In many history books, you will read about the Sidonians under the name Phoenicia. The Greeks called the Sidonians Phoenicians. Land of palm is what he says right here. Other scholars have said there are other reasons for the name, because they found many palm trees there. But the Sidonians called their nation by the name of Canaan, aka Canaan. All right, so this is another example of, like for example, the Egyptians didn't call themselves Egyptians. They called themselves Kemet or Ham. All right. The Phoenicians, they didn't call themselves Phoenicians. They called themselves Canaanites. All right. Phoenicia, or the land of Cydonia, or the land of the Sidonians, was located in north of Palestine along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. What does that say? Hounded by that sea on the west and by the mountain ranges of Lebanon on the east. Tyre and Zidon were founded about 2300 BC. All right, so yeah, these cities were like before Abraham, right? Stepping off the ark, stepping off the boat, they went and founded Tyre and Zidon. All right, those Canaanites. The Tel El Amarna tablets show that Tyre was a place of great strength in the 15th century BC. All right, so 15th century BC, that would be, like Joshua, somewhere in there. All right. It says 15th century BC, Sidon was still older. For a long time, it was the only black Phoenician city known to the Greeks. Even after Tyre took the leadership, the Greeks and the Hebrews spoke of the Phoenicians as Sidonians, and King Ethbal of Tyre is called king of the Zidonians. All right. So again, he is, as a framing device, he's looking at this from these different Hamitic peoples. All right. This next paragraph. These black people were proficient in philosophy, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic, and navigation. They had good harbors, which enabled them to navigate to distant lands, such as Cyprus, which is an island in the Mediterranean, Sardinia, which is on the other side of Italy, Crete, which is one close to Israel, Rhodes, same, Cadiz in Spain, again, that's Tarshish, Sicily, Carthage in North Africa near Tunis, and we're going to get to Carthage here in a minute. Tangier again is Tunis, Tunisia, Ophir, and the Canary Isles. All right, so he's confused about what Ophir is here. It's they didn't have access to Ophir until after the League with Solomon. All right. These Phoenicians were skilled also in metalwork, needlework, and embroidery. They extracted dye from shellfish abounding in the adjacent waters. This dye became known as Tyrian purple. They made glass from the white sand of the Mediterranean coast, right? So these, as Solomon had complimented Hiram, these were very skilled people, skilled in their labors, skilled in their works. All right? The Phoenicians spoke a Hamitic Semitic language so closely allied to the Hebrew that Phoenician and Hebrew, though different dialects, may practically be regarded as the same language. And just to give you a visual example of what this language is, because it will come back. Not in this lesson, but it will come back in later lessons that I do. This language right here, because this is the language that you see on ancient Hebrew artifacts, on ancient Israelite artifacts. This language right here. All right, not the modern style looking Assyrian block type text. It's this text right here. All right, and this text right here is the foundation for the Greek alphabet, what later became the Latin alphabet that we still use today. All right, as you can see, this Aleph is very similar to an A on its side. D, Daleth, is similar to the D. Zayin here is the same thing as a Z. Nun is an N. Mem is a M. And you can just see the Taw is a T. All these letters, Heth is very similar to an H. This language right here, the ancient Hebrew, the ancient Phoenician, which was the same thing, all right, is the foundation for all the Western languages that we use today. Spanish, English, German, French, it doesn't matter. This is the foundation. All right, again, L is the same, K is turned backwards, same thing. All right, so that's the language that they spoke. That's the Hebrew. All right, may practically be regarded as the same language. It was different dialects of the same language. All right, as it was previously stated, there were 11 Canaanite tribes: Sidonians, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Hebrew has its origin in the Canaanite language, and see, he's got that reversed. All right, because he's looking at it from a black first, African first point of view. He's got it twisted, when really Canaanite language stems from the Hebrew, as all languages do. All right, that was the language that they were speaking when they stepped off the boat, was Hebrew, was that same Hebrew. All right. It says, when Abraham came from the region of Babylon into the land of Canaan, he found the Canaanite language similar to his own language. It was the same language. Everybody was speaking Hebrew. Not everybody, because they branched off after the Tower of Babel, but some people still kept that Hebrew. Abraham communicated very well with the inhabitants of the new land, adopted the Canaanite language. Well, they were speaking the same language. Made certain modifications, and it became known as Hebrew. No, Paleo, Hebrew, Phoenician is the same language. Different dialects. The Hebrew language was very similar to the Canaanite, says the Bible Dictionary. Phoenician or Canaanite can be classified as an African language because the Canaanites were blood brothers of the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Nubians, Sudanese, and other Africans. The Phoenicians established a colony in North Africa called Carthage. All right, so keep that in mind. He says right here that the Phoenicians established a colony known as Carthage. All right, and they, Carthaginians, always consider themselves Canaanites. All right, so again, keep that in mind, that the Phoenicians established a city in North Africa called Carthage. All right. And this is just going to show that this is just saying that the Africans and Canaanites were relatives, which we know. All right. All right, we'll pick up right here in this paragraph. It says, the wealth of Phoenicia or Carthage was predicated on clandestine technical procedures and manufacture, secret mines and secret mines of advantageous and expensive metals, concealed secret trading posts in the remote areas from Ethiopia to the Pillars of Hercules, right? So that's, the Phoenicians always had that access from deep in Africa to Europe. They always had that on lock, all right? Their knowledge of navigation enabled them to reach the British Isles and the Arctic Ocean, all right? So, you know, all the way up into, from Britain to Ethiopia, they had all that on lock, all right? Because they were, as you read their judgment in Ezekiel 28, it talks about how they were merchants, seafaring tradesmen, all right? Don't want to keep reading in this. Oh yeah, because this talks about the alphabet. The English alphabet derived from two ancient black nations, the Phoenician Canaanite alphabet and the Hebrew. The Phoenicians had a powerful navy. They were a great trading people. When the Phoenicians traded with the Greeks did not have an alphabet. All right. As a result, they adopted the Phoenician alphabet in order to transact business. The Greeks passed this alphabet to the Romans, and the Romans transmitted to the German Anglo-Saxon tribes. Then it was brought to the British Isles. The first two letters of the Phoenician and Hebrew alphabet are Aleph and Bet, which is similar to the word alphabet, right? So even the word alphabet comes from the Hebrew. All right. So we see about Carthage here. Yeah, so it talks a little bit more about Carthage. So let's get into that a little bit. We're not going to get into like the Punic Wars and things like that, but we'll get a little bit into Carthage. I think I was on 101. Is that right? No. Have I skipped over it? I probably skipped over it. Let's check this out. No. Maybe I didn't. Let's go back. Where was that? 107? Yes. Okay. Yes. I'll pick up with this right here. Yeah. Actually, we're going to hold off on that and read this so we get the context again. Because even he does not keep the same context. We should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migration since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. All right, so that's 10th century BC. That's 1000 BC, essentially. 900s, but you get my point. The language, which is called Hebrew Phoenician or Canaanite, was employed in the lands called Phoenicia, Palestine, or Canaan for over 1,000 years before the Aramaeans, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob came to Canaan, right? So the Phoenicians were there, speaking Hebrew, doing business, all that kind of stuff, before the Israelites got there, before the forefathers of the Israelites got there even, all right? The Hebrew Phoenician, no, it says the Israelites lost their Aramaic language and adopted the Hebrew speech of the Canaanites. Not true. They spoke Hebrew, all right? The Hebrew Phoenician merchants from the cities of Sidon and Tyre controlled the trade along the Mediterranean coast for more than 1,000 years before there were any economic treaties made with the Israelites, all right? So again, keep that in mind. They had all that on lock. That's why instead of going to war, they saw the Israelites rise up and they said, hey, we want to have peace with you, all right? We want to make a league with you because we see what you got access to and you see what we got access to, and it can be mutually beneficial. Plus, Hiram loved David and therefore loved Solomon. All right. The Hebrew-speaking Phoenicians, Canaanites, established their greatest city, Carthage at Tunis in North Africa. All the Canaanites were black people, all right? But notice it said the Hebrew-speaking Phoenicians, and it says Canaanites out to the side. But let's read on. Before the Phoenicians established their colony, Carthage in Africa, many Hebrew-speaking Canaanites had migrated across northern Africa. One Tosefta, quoting an older source, says that when Joshua approached Canaan, he told the inhabitants that 3 courses were open to them. They could either leave the country, or they could sue for peace, or they could declare war against him. The Girgashites, among others, preferred to withdraw into Africa. All right, so Mr. Windsor here, Dr. Windsor, I believe, is letting you know that even the Talmud, which I reject, I do not believe, but perhaps it can be used as a historical source. I'm not even that familiar with it to say, but he says that even they say in the Talmud that the Canaanites, some Canaanites, withdrew into deep Africa, all right? The Girgashites, among others, preferred to withdraw into Africa. The Tosefta goes on to say that the Amorites, the Cadmonai, the Kenites, and the Kenizzites, some of whom figure among the founders of Carthage, also went into Africa. These traditions date from a period when communication between Africa and Phoenicia were continuous. The proper names of Girgash and Kenaz are often met with Carthaginian and Phoenician inscriptions. The Talmud says that the Canaanites in Africa asked Alexander the Great to restore them to their country, which had been taken from their ancestors by Joshua ben Nun. These traditions have been ratified by the fathers of the church. Thus, St. Jerome calls the witness the Talmud to support his statement that the Girgashites established colonies in Africa. And St. Augustine designates the natives of Africa as Canaanites. So like the early church leaders knew that the Canaanites went into Africa, all right? And evidently this process started even as far back as the days of Joshua, all right? But, again, the Phoenicians always had Africa and Europe on lock. All that whole region, Mediterranean, all that region. All right. The prophet Isaiah says that 5 cities in Africa will speak the language of Canaan, right? He represents a prophecy in Isaiah. But, that prophecy is just about how, the Israelites going to be in rulership in the kingdom. We should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migration since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians, right? But since Dr. Windsor is trying to go the black route first, he neglects to see, or rather just fails to see, how a lot of these colonies that he's saying were founded by Canaanites were actually founded by Israelites, all right? the Phoenicians established their metropolis, Carthage, in the 9th century BC, right? So that's 100 years after this league was made with Solomon, all right? And as we saw, the ships of Tarshish, they're gone for 3 years at a time, all right? So all throughout Europe, Africa, all that region, that was established and inhabited by Israelites. And I'd also be willing to say the same about Ophir, all right, in India, a colony established by Israelites, all right. In the 9th century BC, eventually they conquered the neighboring tribes from Libya to the Atlantic Ocean, disseminating their Hebrew Phoenician language and culture in every direction, meaning, Hebrew language and customs. The Hebrew Phoenician language and culture were invigorated and strengthened by the deportation and migration of energetic black Hebrews from Palestine. All right, so he's actually saying it now. All right, Ptolemy Soter of Egypt conquered Syria and Phoenicia, deporting more than 100,000 Hebrews. The Persian king Cambyses had previously sanctioned the colonization of Hebrews in Egypt. During the wars of the Maccabees, thousands of Hebrews became slaves and exiles. Ptolemy Lathyrus captured 10,000 slaves from the region of the Sea of Galilee, right? So he's talking about all these different Israelites being brought to Africa, or rather even fleeing to Africa, all right? The Persian king Cambyses, yeah, I read about that. The kings of Egypt, Psamtik the first and second, used Israelite garrisons on the Egyptian borders near Libya. The wars with Rome compelled hundreds of thousands more to escape into North Africa. During the Punic Wars and after, North Africa contained a large Hebrew population. This Hebrew population made converts and intermarried with the Canaanites and native Africans. All right? And see, that's what we started to see even from the days of Solomon. And we're going to read about that if we have time. I'm already about running out of time. But Israelites always intermarried with these Canaanites that they were sailing around with, all right? Now, obviously, you didn't have, like, women on the ship and things like that. They would have the women at the house and things like that. But they would always intermix with these people when they got to these places. That was the thing about the Israelites. God told them not to do that, but they did that anyway. All right? And I don't want to read necessarily all this about Hannibal. Well, it is just a couple paragraphs, but yeah, let's go ahead and read this. I don't want to get into Hannibal and the Punic Wars and things like that, just about Carthage and the founding. At the ruins of Carthage, archaeologists have found about 4,000 inscriptions in the ancient language of Canaan. Nahum Schultz says these inscriptions date from the time of Nehemiah, of Simon the Just, of Hannibal, and Hasdrubal, says Schloutz. And most valuable of all, we have found again the ancient language and writing of Canaan, the rich, idiomatic speech of a city which once counted 700,000 inhabitants, right? So that's talking about Carthage, a large city, especially in ancient times. And we Hebrew writers, we who write and fill in our biblical tongue, have recognized at once that this recalled Phoenician language is nothing more nor less than Hebrew, right? So even in this book, From Babylon to Timbuktu, you had Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor trying to make the case that the Phoenician language is something, or that the Hebrews learned the Phoenician language. But you see from a man who speaks Hebrew, this Schloutz, this Nahum Schloutz, and he said, look, this Phoenician language, that's just Hebrew. They're the same thing, all right? A pure Hebrew dialect, nearly the same as was spoken in the country of Israel, all right? So, of course, we'll never have the pure language. We'll never know the pure dialect until, kingdom come. But we see here that this Phoenician language is the closest thing that we got to what the Hebrew people spoke, what the Israelites spoke, all right? And this language is what influenced all other languages from that region, all right? The population of Carthage was derived from Palestine, and its civilization was Hebraic in origin. Schloutz is certain, after much research, that the language Hannibal spoke and in which he directed his troops was Hebrew. All right, the greatest war general to ever live. All right, Hannibal. and he was a Hebrew from Carthage. There is evidence that the Carthaginians possessed a high priesthood, and their ceremonies and sacrifices were similar to the rituals found in the book of Leviticus. All right. According to some inscriptions, the Hebrew tribes of Asher and Zebulun were in Carthage from the foundation of the city. So we can't sit here and say that Carthage was a Phoenician city unless you're going to sit here and acknowledge the Israelite Phoenician connection, because Asher and Zebulun was in the city from the beginning. All right, from the foundation of the city. At the ruins of Carthage were excavated many inscriptions containing many Hebrew names such as Joab, Joas, and Joel. The city of Tunis is said to be neither Arab nor European. Tunis is a Jewish city. Nowhere else does the Jew feel at home as he does in Tunis. Tunis being the same as the ancient Carthage. All right, this is North Africa. Tunis, the interior of Hebrew Carthage, is the eternal city of the Jews. For like the phoenix, the Jews have risen again and again out of the ashes of their destruction. After the sacking at Carthage, the Jews were found again in Carthage under Roman domination after the Byzantine persecutions. They fled into the desert. And even under the persecution of the Arabs, the Jews somehow managed to survive catastrophe after catastrophe. All right, and see, that's why you see the travel, the popping up the cities. All right, the establishing of these cities were always Hebraic in origin. All right, and this Israelite Phoenician connection started with this brotherly covenant made between Solomon and Hiram. All right. Now, I want to read this about the Queen of Sheba, and then we'll close it out, and we'll be back next week to talk about the split. All right. 1 Kings 10, starting with verse 1. And when the Queen of Sheba heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great train, meaning everybody's, behind her, with camels that bear spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. Right? She asked him all the questions. And Solomon told her all her questions. There was not anything hid from the king, which he told her not. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and his cupbearers, and his ascent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Right? So she's looking at the staff. She's looking at how everything's put together, how he moves, how he walks, how he talks, and she's just blown away by it. And she said to the king, "It was a true report that I heard in my own land of thy acts and thy wisdom. Howbeit I believed not the words until I came, and mine eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Thy wisdom and prosperity exceedeth the fame which I heard. Happy are thy men, happy are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee, and that hear thy wisdom." Right? So even all the servants of Solomon, wasn't nobody complaining. Everybody was rich. Everybody was living a life. All right? "Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighted in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore made he thee king, to do judgment and justice." And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices, very great store, and precious stones. There came no more such abundance of spices as these which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. All right, and Sheba is Yemen. That's Sheba. See if I got the world map here. Yeah. So this is Sheba. All right, so she brought her train up this way. All her spices and stuff, she came through Saudi Arabia, and she brought them to King Solomon. All right. And I think we read this, but I'll go over it again. Yeah. "And the navy also of Hiram that brought gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir great plenty of almug trees and precious stones. And the king made of the almug trees pillars for the house of the Lord, and for the king's house. Harps also and psalteries for singers. There came no such almug trees, nor were seen unto this day." All right, so trees on top of trees on top of trees, wood on top of wood. "And King Solomon gave unto the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, beside that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants." Right? So she just came up to meet Solomon, see if what she'd been told was true, And she found out, hey, I didn't even know. I didn't even know how wonderful this country is, how wonderful this king is, how wise he is, right? All right. So with that, we see how Solomon made shields of gold. All right. I can keep reading just a little bit. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon 1 year was 606 talents of gold. That's 666 talents of gold. Beside that, he had of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spice merchants and of all the kings of Arabia and of the governors of the country. Right, so you see here how it said targets of gold, shields of gold. All right. Yeah, so we read about this. Yeah, it was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon to make all these gold things. But anyway, so it mentioned the traffic of the kings of Arabia. All right, so really, and we talked about how the Phoenicians, how Solomon made a league with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians went all the way from Europe to Ethiopia, right? So all this he got on lock. All right, so when you rule from Europe to India, from Ethiopia up to Babylon, I mean, he's ruling the whole world. All right. You may say, well, that's not the whole world. That was before people was over here in the West. All right. The first inhabitants of these parts of Africa are going to be the Canaanites and the Israelites that was mixed with them, right? The Phoenicians. All right. It was before people was over here in the East. There may have been people down here in the islands in Australia, but it was before that was in China and things like that. All right. That didn't come till later. So to rule all this region, that means you're ruling the world at that time. That means you're ruling the world. All right. So with that, next week we'll pick up with the split and the cause of the split and all that kind of stuff in 1 Kings 11. But with that, hope y'all learned something. I say shalom. Most High in Christ bless.